All right, we got us a Super Bowl matchup. It's set in stone. We know exactly what we're going to be looking at. We got the Kansas City Chiefs and we got the San Francisco 49ers. It's the day after the conference championship games. We've known for about 18 hours for sure what the matchup was going to be. And, I've been thinking about this matchup. I've been thinking about who I think is going to win. I've been thinking about the path that these two teams have been on to get to this championship tilt. And I'm of course I'm relating it to what I see from my team, the Seahawks. I'm relating everything I see to my team and what does it mean? What does it represent? Because of course I'm going to watch the Super Bowl. I'm going to be entertained by it hopefully. I'm going to have my rooting interest, but I'm mainly thinking about what does this mean for my team? What does this represent? What should my team be doing? What did my team not do so they weren't as good as these two teams? Because, the 49ers have been clearly one of the best teams in the league all season long. At the start of the season, we didn't know necessarily, and, they lost a couple games, but every game they played in, even the losses, they were either, clearly the better team, they were the better team, or it was close. They never got blown out. Every game they played came that they lost came down to the last couple seconds, I think, last couple minutes. The Chiefs, they maybe they caught a little bit of a break when the Ravens went out the way they did, and they didn't have to go through them. But they won 12 games. They survived some injuries. They survived some problems. They got the first round bye because they beat New England in Foxborough, which was a huge, huge, huge hill for them to get over. And they overcame two deficits in the playoffs. One of them, a 24-point hole that they dug themselves out of. So this these two teams are legit. These two teams have been great teams all season long. You never could have. There's no. This is not a fluke. This is not some sort of thing where they caught a couple lucky breaks. They got hot at the right time. They didn't have a very good season and they just caught fire at the end. Nothing like that. If the Titans had made it, then maybe so. I wouldn't take a ton from this, but these are clearly two of the 4 or 5 best teams in the league at least. And watching it happen, watching those games yesterday, especially the late game, but really both games, kind of made me sick and it kind of made me frustrated because when I look at these two teams, the number one thing that I take away is offensive genius. That's the number one reason why it seems to me that these two teams are in the Super Bowl. And I look at my team and I just don't see it. Like, to start with the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs, they got a lot of talent on offense. They do. I'm not going to front. I'm not going to say anything else. Pat Mahomes is a generational talent. Tyreek Hill's one of the fastest wide receivers I've ever seen. Travis Kelce is one of the most dynamic tight ends in the NFL. That offense should be good. I'm not saying that they're a product of the system or anything like that, but if you look at the offensive system that the Chiefs utilize, last year they were building their offense around Pat Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, of course, but they also had a guy named Kareem Hunt, who, as a rookie, established himself as one of the best, most dynamic running threats in the NFL. He was great with Alex Smith, and it looked like he was going to be even better with Pat Mahomes. One week, he's gone. They lose him. He's out. He's out of the NFL. He might never play again. Just like that, they lose him. Did it phase him? I mean, they probably got a little worse running the ball if you wanted to really look at just the numbers. They probably ran the ball a little less. Of course, it affected their stats, but did it stop them from being a super productive offense? And it's not like they just found another guy who was as good as Kareem Hunt. No Chief this year had more than 500 rushing yards. Damian Williams led the team in rushing yards with less than 500 yards. You take out the 91-yard run he had against the Minnesota Vikings. He's as mediocre and forgettable as it gets as a running back. They had LaShawn McCoy start a bunch of games. He looked pretty washed up most of the season. Now he's not even playing. Their third leading rusher behind those two guys is Pat Mahomes, who, by the way, played part of this season on a bum leg and couldn't even scramble for a decent chunk of this season. So they lose that guy, doesn't phase them. Offensively, they lose Tyreek Hill for a month, and he comes back and he's not even 100%. He doesn't even have that good of a season. Not even 60 catches, less than 900 receiving yards. Not much of a season from Tyreek Hill. From a guy who we have come to expect to be one of the best wide receivers in football, it was actually a very forgettable season. He missed 4 games. He didn't play amazing in the games he did play. There were a couple games where he was clearly working his way back. This team overcame all that. They plugged in a guy named Mecole Hardman, who was an afterthought coming into this season, a rookie, and they got a nice rookie season out of him. They plug in retreads who have been kicked off other teams like Sammy Watkins, got some decent production out of him. They lose Pat Mahomes for a couple games, for 2.5 games. They plug in 35-year-old Matt Moore. They still produce on offense. They still score points, and they still win a game. They beat the Vikings with Matt Moore. Okay? And they put up points with Matt Moore because they have a system. You can take away some of their players. You can take away their all-pro running back who looked like he was on his way to having a great career and suddenly it's over. You take away their all-world generational quarterback for a couple games. You take away their best wide receiver for a month. And they still find a way to produce. They still find a way to have a good season. They still find a way to win some games because they have a system. And that system can work even if you take a couple cogs out of it. It might stumble a little bit. It might have a slow game, a slow quarter, a slow half. Of course, they're not going to be able to do all the same things that they do when they don't have Mahomes. They lost a winnable game to the Packers when they didn't have Mahomes. Maybe Mahomes wins that game, would win that game. But point is, you can take away their best players and they still have a game plan to go out there and win the game. Even as we speak, they don't have a running back who anybody gives a crap about, I think, in the NFL right now. Like, does anybody out there think that Damian Williams is some great running back who just doesn't put up big yards because they pass so much? No, he's an afterthought. If Damian Williams is out of the NFL next year, the Chiefs are going to have their choice of, a dozen Damian Williams type players who they can just plug in, and they're not even going to notice. So you see the effects of having one of the greatest offensive minds in NFL history at head coach for Kansas City, Andy Reid. One of the greatest quarterback gurus of all time. We saw it in Philadelphia, and now we're seeing it in Kansas City. You plug in players, that system works. They have great players, don't get me wrong. But that system is stronger than any one player on that team, possibly even including their all-world quarterback. And then you look at the 49ers. And with this team, even more so than the Chiefs, I see it because, Jimmy Garoppolo is just okay. He's decent. He had a pretty good season. He can do some good things. He's not great. Sometimes he's not even good. He's a guy. He's a guy that gave $140 million and he jumps on board and, he's a decent quarterback. He does some good stuff, but they're not really getting $140 million worth of quarterback out of him. 27 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, almost 4,000 yards, high completion percentage. Really, and this is the thing that drives me crazy. This is the thing that really blows my mind. Listen to this. Nick Mullins last year, because last year Jimmy Garoppolo goes down after 2 games, 2.5 games or something. Nick Mullins plays a good chunk of that season after C.J. Beathard gets hurt. Nick Mullins was actually playing some really good football for this 49ers team last year. Not that much worse than what Garoppolo gave the 49ers this year. Like Mullins, go look it up. Nick Mullins played some good ball for this team last year, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we saw it yesterday. Garoppolo might have thrown the ball about 10 times yesterday. I can't even remember. He might have had 10 pass attempts yesterday. I think he had 6 in the fourth quarter. And this is a 49ers team that ran the ball all over the Packers. Just might have been 300 rushing yards in that game. I can't even remember. Raheem Mostert, 200 yards. Coleman did some stuff. Debo did some stuff on end arounds. I think Breida had a couple carries. I can't remember. I can't even remember all the guys that gave carries in that game. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who it was. And let me frame it like this, okay? 2 years ago, when Kyle Shanahan, who is the offensive guru behind this 49ers team, when he started putting together this team, they signed Jerick McKinnon, and he was supposed to be their guy at running back. He was supposed to be the workhorse, the main guy they built their rushing attack around. I don't think he's played a snap for the 49ers. He got hurt, and I don't think he's been back. 2 years in San Francisco, I don't think he's taken a regular season or postseason snap. This offseason, they go out and get Tevin Coleman, and they're thinking he's going to be their guy. They're going to pair up him with hopefully McKinnon, and that's going to be their 1-2 punch at running back. Well, McKinnon never gets back. Coleman is their third best running back. Raheem Mostert, a dude who's been kicked around the league about 10 times. Go look at his PFR page. He's been on the Eagles. He's been on the Bears. I think he was on the Dolphins. He's been on like half the teams in the league, I swear. And they plug him in, and he's their best running back this year. 5.5 yards a carry, almost 800 yards from a dude who the league could not have been more done with. And then you have Matt Breida, some undrafted rookie from a couple years ago. I can't remember if Chip Kelly drafted him or not, or if he was Chip Kelly picked him up. Can't remember if maybe he was one of Kyle Shanahan's first undrafted free agency pickups, but he goes out there, averages 5 yards a carry, gets 600 yards. And yesterday, I mean, Coleman didn't have a bad season. He did pick up over 500 yards. He did some good stuff for the 49ers for sure. But my point is, yesterday, Coleman didn't do hardly anything. So that's your main workhorse that you are depending on this year. You're in the NFC Championship game. You want to run the ball. Your main running back, the guy who you thought was going to be your guy, he's not out there. And then he gets hurt. So now you're down to guys who you were thinking were going to be your bench warmers like Mostert and Breida, and you're still running the ball all over the all over the Packers, because it doesn't matter who the running backs are. You have a system. Like if Mostert got hurt in the first quarter yesterday and they had to roll with Matt Breida, does anybody think that Matt Breida wouldn't have run all over the Packers? If they had to go to Jeff Wilson, their fifth string running back, does anybody think Jeff Wilson probably wouldn't have been fine? They have a system. They have play calls. They have a scheme that allows their players to look better than they are, that allows their players to be their best selves, that allows them to win an NFC title game in a blowout. You know, that game was over at halftime, and their quarterback doesn't have to do anything. And I'm not going to say that the 49ers are bereft of talent. George Kittle's the best tight end in football right now. Emmanuel Sanders is a good wide receiver. Kyle Juszczyk, I mean, I know he's just a fullback, but he's good. Debo had a good second half of the year. He started out a little slow, but Debo's had been a good rookie for him. They have good players, but the players are secondary to the scheme and the system that they utilize. And even when they're not getting contributions from the players they were expecting to coming into the season, you know, when Coleman isn't the guy, when McKinnon can't get off IR, they still find a way to implement their system and do what they want to do. They wanted to run the ball this year. They ran for 2,300 yards this season over 16 games. Yesterday, they might have ran it for 300. I can't remember. But it doesn't matter who the players were. They just work those players into their scheme, and they produce. The 49ers had, I think, the second most points in the NFL this year. And they did it with a quarterback who's just okay. He's good. He's not great. He's not one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's solid. They did it with a bunch of running backs that most people didn't give a second thought before the season started. I mean, we know for a fact that about 10 different NFL front offices didn't think anything of Raheem Mostert coming into the season, or else they would have kept him. And here they are, both these teams in the Super Bowl, because they have a great system. And I know I've used that word 100 times in this video, but just thinking about it, it's like, is that really all it is? And I know Kyle Shanahan and Andy Reid are different breeds. There are not Andy Reids and Kyle Shanahans growing on trees. But it really shines a light on how these teams are doing things versus how these Seahawks are doing things. Our scheme seems to be, we need our talent to win these games, right? I've said it before, I'll say it again. Our talent has to win for us to be able to do well and win these games. If Tyler Lockett isn't able to outrun the guys covering him, he's not going to get open because we don't scheme him open. If DK Metcalf can't do some superhuman stuff to get open by a step and come down with a ball that's way over most people's heads because he's so big and such a freak athlete, he's not going to catch the ball because we're not scheming him open. We're not scheming these creative run lanes for Chris Carson because we just want to give him the ball and run the ball up the middle and, you know, maybe break some tackles and we'll figure it out like that. You know, it's totally different because, look, we have a lot of talent on this offense when it's healthy. By the end of the season, maybe you can say we didn't. But that's the issue when you're depending on your talent. The talent can go away like that, and then what do? I mean, you know, I use the example of Kareem Hunt for the Chiefs. They lost Kareem Hunt. They just rolled on. If that happened to Chris Carson this offseason or after week 4 next year and he was just gone, what will we do? Would we just be able to plug in the next running back and continue to produce on offense? I kind of doubt it. We seem so dependent on Chris Carson's ability to break tackles and run between the tackles that I don't think we could just plug in another guy and continue to put up points. If something happens to Lockett, can we replace him? No, we already know that. You know why? Because Lockett was basically limping around the field for about a month in the middle of this season, and our offense went to shit. We can't survive a gimped number 1 wide receiver. The offense just laid an egg for about a month until Lockett got good again. Could you imagine what this team would look like if Wilson missed a season? Or even missed a couple games? Do you think we'd be able to win against a good Vikings team like the Chiefs did with Matt Moore? Do you think we'd be able to piece together a good passing attack like the Niners did with Nick Mullins in 2018? Yeah. So I look at that kind of stuff. I look at what these great teams are able to do and how they're doing it. And I don't see any of that with this Seahawks team. I see us going, okay, Wilson, go make people miss, go scramble around, and go make some perfect throw into a tight window after the receiver does something awesome to beat coverage. And if nobody gets open, just lay down and take the sack or take off and try to pick up a couple yards. Or, you know, it's all based off talent. And we got talent. I mean, next year, Lockett and Metcalf might be one of the best 1-2 punches in the league at wide receiver. Obviously, Wilson is super talented, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. We should have a pretty good stock of running backs to start the season next year with Penny, Carson, maybe Lynch, and Homer as a third down back. If Will Dissly can come back from his injury, which we'll see, we're going to have a good tight end, a nice tight end. But what happens when we get to the end of the season and, you know, there are injuries every year? What happens when we lose Metcalf next year for a couple games? Is the offense just going to die? What happens when Dissly gets hurt again, which is very possible with what we know about him, and we're back to Jacob Hollister? I'm not saying the 49ers would be able to shrug off the loss of a guy like George Kittle. Seems like they handle this stuff better than we do. And that's what I feel like is missing right now. All right, long video, longer than I wanted it to be, but I had a lot to get off my chest. But if you're like me, you were watching those two teams that are going to represent the conferences in the Super Bowl this year, yesterday, and you were thinking about why isn't this team able to do some of the things that those teams do? And my fear is we're not going to address any of that this offseason because the people that matter don't see it as a problem. But more positive videos coming out later. But I can't just keep quiet about something I was thinking to myself as I was watching those games yesterday, man. All right, peace.